Yeah, I remembered because Katie really wanted me to record it. Okay, just getting started. So I will share my screen. Just a second. How do I share it? There we go. Share. Sorry, y'all. It's taking me somewhere else. Hope, do you have the slides by chance? Because mine's not letting me share.
I don't think I do.
Can I send them to you really quickly? Because I don't know why. And I want to make sure that we can see those. Sorry, everybody. The tech is not our friend today.
No worries. Literally, tech will never get better, even though we've been doing it for so long.
Thank you.
It has not gotten easier with time.
I totally agree. I can also try to do it without. Here we go. Okay, let me try this. Again, sorry, everybody. I don't know why this isn't working. Okay. All right, now it's not even, maybe it's my situation. Okay, one more try here, y'all, and then we'll keep going. Here we go. Hope. I sent it to you. Sorry that took a minute. Hopefully that'll work now. I don't know why it's not letting me share screen. Let me know if you got it there, and then if you can just click through while I'm talking, then we should be good.
All right, let's see. There it is.
I believe in technology. And if not, I can always do it without, which is totally fine too.
All right, it's going to share my screen and then I can switch over to the PowerPoint. Can you guys see?
Wonderful, yes.
All
You
right.
are sharing screen. You
got it? And I can guide it up and down if you need to.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, thanks everybody for their patience. So you can scroll to the next one. So something that's really important that we want to make sure everybody takes home tonight and understands this, that being LGBTQ2IA+ is not itself a risk factor for substance use or poor mental health outcomes. It's the homophobia, the transphobia, you know, the isolation, the discrimination. Those are what the risk factors are, right? So it's not about the individual like being trans, right? Maybe they have depression and they're trans. They're not depressed because they're trans. That's kind of the message that this is trying to send. And what this is explaining is this minority stress model. I also like to call it, with my clients, death by 1,000 cuts. So for example, every single day, a kiddo is in school and they're getting misgendered, right? They don't have an affirmative home to go to. They're getting derogatory messages and awful, hateful messages from media. Every little day they're hearing these things, and it's another little cut, right? Eventually that cut gets so deep that your arm kind of falls off, and it's extremely painful. And when we get to that point, even before that point, self-medicating through substance use is huge. And obviously poor mental health is happening. So that's kind of the idea of this minority stress model. So again, it's not about being gay in itself is not a risk factor. Being trans in itself is not a risk factor. It's the transphobia, homophobia, discrimination, oppression. Those are all the risk factors for substance use and poor mental health. So if you want to scroll down again, Hope. So let's talk a little bit of numbers. This slide is specifically referencing substance use among queer people. So we have 1.3 times more likely to binge drink than their heterosexual and cisgender counterparts, 1.6 times more likely to use marijuana, 2.9 times more likely to engage in IV drug use, which is huge amount, and 3.3 times more likely to use cocaine. So these numbers are high, and I guarantee you that we're having this conversation right now, these numbers will probably be outdated tomorrow because it's just going up, right? So serious high numbers in substance use, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But let's scroll to the mental health piece, right? LGBTQ mental health disparities. LGBTQ individuals are more than twice as likely as heterosexual men and women to have a mental health disorder in their lifetime, right? They are 2.5 times more likely to experience depression, anxiety, substance misuse compared with their heterosexual individuals. Women who identify as lesbian, bisexual are more than twice as likely to engage in heavy use, right? So again, this is showing that overall, within the queer community, there are higher rates of substance use and mental health disparities. Now, these are very generalized statistics. There are a lot of other factors that come into play with different risk factors, right? And there are a lot of other factors that come into play with these numbers. Where you grew up makes a big difference. How affirmative your home is, how affirmative your school is, race, pretty much all of those things can impact these numbers and push them up or down. What we do know is that if adolescents have at least one adult that has their back, right? One adult that is affirmative, that is supportive, that is celebrating them, the rate for mental health and substance use gets cut in half. Okay, so if you're a parent or a teacher or a community member on here that's an adult and you hear that, if you show up for your kiddos or for kiddos in the community in that way, you are helping lower the rate of mental health disparities in substance use. So I think that's it on slides. Like I said, I wanted to just do a quick overview, give you some stats, give you a little bit of information, and make sure we have the goal set here. Awesome. Thank you so much, Hope. And thanks everybody for sticking with us. So I'm going to hop into the really fun part with our two amazing panelists, who I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So whoever wants to go first, you want to unmute and introduce yourself, name, pronouns, a little bit about yourself, and maybe why you are on here tonight. Go ahead.
I can go. My name's Hope. I use the pronoun she, they. I just completely blanked on what I had prepared to talk about.
Totally okay.
I got the whole screen sharing thing distracted me.
Yep, me too.
I am currently in long-term healthy recovery. I celebrated 5 years in March, and I guess I'm on here because I am going into social work to do work for prevention, just because of my past, and I feel very driven to do this and to help the community in a way that is very near and dear to my heart. And I grew up in the South as well, so that also kind of plays into what we're talking about today.
Thanks, Hope. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, folks. My name is Haji Safi. I use they, them pronouns. I'm actually in Chicago, where I work at a children's hospital doing LGBTQ access work, gender equity work, HIV and STI education, and outreach and community work. And I am the LGBTQ liaison at the hospital as well. So, gay for pay, super fun. And I in terms of recovery, I used to use crystal meth for many, many years, and then have other like relationships with substances now. But the meth use was what really like drove me into this kind of work, especially for AMAB folks in the queer community, and that is on 6 years since I used last. So
awesome, thanks so much. And again, I'll introduce myself again. Kate Roberts, she, her pronouns. Yes, I'm a therapist, and I'm also a person in long-term recovery. I'm a queer lesbian. I'm a dog mom. I'm a wife. I'm a lot of different things. And I'm really happy to be here, that we get this opportunity to speak to everybody about what it is like growing up queer. I grew up on the main line in the late 90s, early 2000s, main line of Philadelphia. And it was a very different world back then, which I'll get into and we'll all get to talk about. So I'm just going to jump in with the first question, y'all. So first question is, what is your experience as a queer person with substance use and mental health within your community? And what I mean by community is community as you define it, right? When I think about it, for example, I think of my queer friends, my recovery community, that type of things, whatever community you choose. Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. Can you do me a favor? Because I'm a very visual person. Can you throw that question into the chat? Because I will.
Can. Yep, I got you.
I'll go these places. I think first for me to define like what community looks like in my relationship with mental health and substance use has really been dependent on what communities have said to me about the other. So if probably couldn't tell by my name, but I am Afghan and first generation. So like, and when I say first generation, I mean like I am the very first person in my entire very, very large family. I have somewhere like 150 cousins to be born in America. So there's like a lot of expectation and pressure about being like the first boy, not a boy, born into the family here. So there is a lot of feelings around like LGBTQ identity and what that means in my community of like my family and my cultural background, and then connecting that stigma of mental health as well, and then putting that alongside a queer community, which can be at times super welcoming, but also super othering as like a non-white person and a non-binary person. So often what I found was substances, especially alcohol, made it really easy for me to kind of just let go and care a little bit less about how people were reacting to me. And it was always the reactions to me and how like folks spoke of and about me. And I would also say that like, while I think mental health has always been something that we as a community of queer folks have often talked about the importance of, I feel, and this was just my personal experience, of course, I'm only speaking for myself here. I feel that when I was younger, we didn't talk about mental health and like the need or access to guidance and support and navigating various identities alongside, what substances look like alongside said identities. So yeah, I think that's just kind of a overview for me.
Yeah.
Question.
No, you totally answered that question. Hope, did you want to jump in on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that was a great way to answer that question. So I guess the first part that really like sticks out to me of that is just, so mental health, I didn't talk about that with my family growing up. It was like seen as you're better than that. Like you don't go seek help for your brain. You go to the doctor for things and things like that. And so I wasn't even exposed to the idea of mental health until I actually went to college. And at that time it was called self-care. And all this was like completely different. And as far as like substance use, I was like socialized as a girl, and I was taught to be small and like quiet and out of the way. And it kind of, I don't know if like how this happened or if this is just who I was, but like I had really bad social anxiety. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't know how to talk to people. I was really scared of just in general, like when there was more than 5 people in a crowd. And that kind of did start to lead to me using substances like at parties to be able to like actually engage with people who were like me, because part of my decision and where I went to school was all about wanting to be who I thought I wanted to be, and it just kind of fed on each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think you both nailed it. That was my experience too, is that, mental health was not discussed. The DARE program was a thing. I don't know if it's still a thing, but back then it was like, just don't do drugs. And we didn't really know anything else beyond that. And being younger and being queer, I didn't know I was queer yet. And we definitely didn't talk about being queer. So totally get kind of the lack of conversations was huge within my family, within my community. Upon getting into recovery, I was really lucky because I found a group of queer people. I basically came out and ran away to California, and lived in California for 12 years. And when I landed there, I got connected in with a group of mostly queer women, and just kind of got scooped up. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I could totally be exactly who I was. Like if I wanted to hold my partner's hand, I didn't feel weird about it. I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I just felt the freedom to be me because they created this magic and this safety. And so community to me was extremely important in that sense for me, like maintaining my recovery. So that was a little bit my experience. Yeah. All right. We good? We want to go on to another question? Yeah? Okay. So looking back on your adolescence, what impact do you believe growing up LGBTQ had on your relationship with substances and or mental health, if any? I'll put it in the chat too. Whoever wants to go first, feel free.
I would say, and I think, you really touched on this earlier in those slide sets, that one thing I would like phrase or state that it was my relationship with alcohol or my relationship with substances typically wasn't around my LGBTQ identity or identities, but my identity in relation to what I was told externally or internally, either from family members, from things that I saw in media or things that I experienced in media. But really, for me, growing up in a really unaffirming space, my parents are very, very Muslim, and like we still don't really talk about my identity. Having that, and then being told like certain parts of yourself are unavoidable, or that's what this means if you're this, impacted my, I would say, image of self. So often when the idea of substances came up, and then I found out that it was a really easy way not to feel feelings, I latched on to, whatever I could find to not feel those feelings. And then when certain things it wasn't even just not feeling those feelings, but also like made things feel good, especially when it pertained to like sex, when it came to like poppers and alcohol and crystal meth, it created this, I guess, positive experience almost, not that it was like actually a positive experience, but this positive feeling related to identity and related to how I could see myself in a different kind of light, one that wasn't necessarily all bad. And, not that using tons of crystal is great for you or anything like that. But if I was already, broken or whatever, I would hear from other folks, then why not at least enjoy what I was doing in that moment? I think growing up, LGBTQ did in certain places really connect me to bars, especially as like an AMAB person. Bars and drinking and being out all night and dancing was like really paramount to community, and always has been. I mean, we've talked and had multiple, papers and research and tons done around like the queer community's relationship with alcohol, and even alcohol's relationship with the queer community. If you look at like Absolute and Stoli and how those organizations just funneled money into LGBTQ spaces, knowing that there was a gold pot at the end of that rainbow. Oh, that was a good reference. I just came up with that reply too. Look at that. There's a gold pot at the end of that rainbow. So I think growing up LGBTQ not only had negative experiences where I wanted to run away from those feelings or subdue said feelings, but in a society where truly, if we look at like capitalism and advertising and profit, when that avenue of alcohol to queer spaces really flourished and became super profitable, it just exacerbated access to these materials, I would say, or to these substances. And you could even really target nicotine. I mean, I know people who used to do before the Obama era, when you could get like little coupons for a free pack of cigarettes, and like people would just go to gay bars and they would just sit there at like the end of the bar, and just people would line up for their free coupons for cigarettes. And I was one of them because I was a poor student then. But it like still like continued furthering that need for nicotine and the access for it, in a way that again just fulfilled addiction and substance use disorders.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything that you said, and I really connected with like so many queer events are saturated in substances and alcohol, and it's like an expectation that like this is what we do, and it's kind of a bummer to find queer spaces that aren't like where drugs or alcohol is the constant fixation, or nicotine, whatever it is. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Hope, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so what I like kind of think of growing up, so I came out when I was 12 or 13, but only like to family, because like I had known for a while, but growing up in the South, like I wasn't exposed to it. I like have uncles and aunts who were queers, but it was always like, oh, that's just her roommate, or that's just his roommate, that kind of talk. And I didn't really understand that until I started coming out. And then I was also at the age where the L Word was on Logo. So like I could watch that at night. And that was like that was my exposure to the community, really, because I didn't know anything else. And if you haven't seen that show, there is a lot of drinking, there's a lot of partying, there's a lot of drug use. And it just seemed like, oh, to be queer, this is what I have to do. But also enduring all of that and like growing up with the idea of like, oh, I have to hide who I am, I was internalizing that as well. When I did finally come out in like fully to like friends, and like my high school found out, I also was like bullied pretty like badly. But the lucky thing is I'm actually very large, and I was an athlete, so people would just like emotionally bully me. I was lucky to not get physically bullied. And I didn't realize that the emotional bullying would take such a toll, but that was also internalized to a lot of self-hatred. And I think with like my relationships to substance use, that made me, when I started to like use in high school, my choice was always alcohol. That was the easiest thing to get when you're a college student, is I could forget. I wouldn't have to worry about like all of these things that I'm going to have to hide when I go back to North Carolina. from college, because I went to a women's college. So I was able to be whoever I wanted to be there, but not when I went home. And that was kind of my relationship. And again, mental health, I still didn't really know what that was. To me, that was just, you don't drink Monday through Thursday, but the rest of the days you could drink. That was like my idea of what mental health was. And I don't actually think that there was any good representation of mental health within the queer community either, really until recently.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed that too. Even within the community, not something we talk, you're a bummer or you're a letdown if you're like, all of that stuff. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. I think for me, yes, especially around sobriety, big time. And like whatever sobriety means to that person too, because yes, there's absence-based sobriety, but there's also harm reduction, and that's another path that works, right? But there can be a lot of disarray even within the community, which I know that we've all experienced because everybody is nodding their head at me. So I'm like, yes, validated. I think for me, thinking about this question, growing up, there was no mirroring happening. I was not exposed in any way, shape, or form. I think the first thing I knew about anything queer was Ellen. And so I really, all I knew was that being queer, being lesbian was not okay. It was not an option, not an option for you. You will not be that. And if you are that, it is not going to be okay. Your life is going to be horrible. So that was the message I was receiving. Don't be gay, basically, right? So I always knew something was going on, so I paid attention to the way that I walked. I paid attention to the pitch of my voice. I paid attention to my mannerisms because I was trying to hide it. I came out when I was 19. So this was all in middle school and in high school that I'm talking about. And I was just really focused on how I presented. And that also led to this self-hatred, like Hope was talking about, truly having to hide myself. And that kind of pain, then I found my best friend alcohol, and then I found my best friend other fun drugs. And that made everything go away. I didn't care about the way that I sat in a chair. I didn't care about the pitch of my voice or how I walked or my mannerisms. Like, I didn't care. Nothing mattered. And again, like, it was such a community thing at the time. So that was kind of like my experience looking back. Anybody else want to add anything as we're kind of discussing? Anything come up? No. Okay.
Sorry, I said no, and then I unmuted because I'm a monster.
No, you're not.
I do think I really like, you had said something a few minutes ago, or it might have been Hope, I'm sorry, around people's relationship with sobriety and what that looks like, and how people respond to folks who maybe not even just experiencing sobriety, but are like trying to take a step back for a moment. I bartended for many, many years. And one of the very first things I clocked, and I also saw it with some friends of mine, was the discomfort people have drinking by themselves, because whatever mirror they might have to see reflected in that other person not joining them. The biggest one that I would see was somebody being like, I'm buying shots for all of these friends. And the one friend would be like, I don't want one. And that person would be like, no, you have to. And this I wouldn't actually say is anything around LGBTQ identity specifically. I think this is American drinking culture, unfortunately, like as a whole. I just think that sometimes we can be a little bit more persuasive in our community. But it's a lot of like, no, you have to. It's like, you're never fun, or you're letting everybody down. And I would get pushback. I say pushback as like a very like, but I would get like rude responses when people would be like, well, I don't want one. And I would back that person up saying, well, they didn't want one, so I'm only going to pour 4 for you. So you're not getting 5. I'm only going to give you 4. And they're, well, you're a bartender. I'm like, well, you're a bad friend, which is, me being a little bit aggressive. But also you see folks react, maybe not negatively, but there could be like oh, you're letting the party down. But I had a friend who I'm very close with, and we're best friends to this day, but he ended up having to navigate his feelings around his drinking when I would take like time away from alcohol. And he'd be like, I don't know if I can hang out with you when you're not drinking. He's like, so I need you to start drinking again. And I was like, that's not how this works. So those pressures around community aren't even just like extended community, can be those like really close social circles that don't know how to navigate a space without that substance, even with somebody that is their closest, nearest, and dearest. It's just like an interesting thing that I've noticed over the years.
Yeah, like you totally nailed it. That's like a powerful thing that you just said, and it's not a good powerful thing, right? But yeah, but I've absolutely had that experience too, and I've lost friendships because of that, so I get that. Hope, did you put a hand, or were you just
sorry, I was unmuting. I was going to kind of just add on to that too, of this like this kind of idea that you have to be using a substance or drinking or anything just to kind of have fun and to party. Like myself included, when I first got sober, I didn't think I could go to concerts or have fun. And then I was like, oh, wait, the only thing holding me back is me. But you're definitely correct. And like you, like people that you maybe used to use drugs or like alcohol with, that was like the perception, is they were like, oh, you're not going to be as much fun as you used to be. You have to be doing this with me. And it's like, no, I can actually be completely there and have fun too.
I think I'm a hell of a lot more fun sober. I was just like sad when I was drinking and using. There was nothing fun about me, and like Hope, you nailed it. Like I can literally go do anything. I've gone to bars, I've gone to pride events, I've gone to concerts. Like I've done all kinds of things. I just do it sober, and I go with people that are kind of like me and have the same kind of mindset. And even when I don't, like, I feel okay about that. When I was newly sober and trying to figure it out, I did kind of stay away from that stuff. But once I got to a comfortable point in my recovery and was practicing all that rigorous honesty, I was able to literally do anything. It's not like a death sentence, how some people make it out to be. Yeah, cool. Anything else we want to add on that one? No? Okay, cool. I love this question. Looking back on your queer adolescence, was there something an adult could have done or said that would have helped you?
I always think about my parents and how they took it when I came out to them. And I got a very stereotypical thing of it's just a phase, which made me want to hide more. But I feel like all I really wanted to hear in that moment was, I love you and I'm going to love you no matter what. And I think about that a lot. Like, that's all I really wanted to hear, that they were going to love me and support me no matter what I did.
Nailed it. Yep. Absolutely. Hadis, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Hope said around like supportive guardians. I think for me, I had like a very, very close relationship with my parents before my coming out, or finding out, which is really what happened. And so it like really impacted my relationship with substances. And I very much like did the rebel thing, and like my parents don't accept me, so I'm going to start smoking now, which then I did for 16 years. I know if my parents were more supportive that I would not have used, I can't say I know that. I believe that had my parents and my family been more supportive because they were so important to me, I would have had potentially a better relationship with substances. I do think that talking to youth who are, part of our wonderful community at large at a younger age, regardless of parental or guardian relationships, around substance use in a harm reduction manner, as opposed to an abstinence only manner, could have also created safer and maybe safer use habits or practices versus what rabbit holes I ended up going through. I don't think anybody on this call necessarily would disagree, but like abstinence only is not something that we've seen ever work. And I think that we continue to do that with a lot of like LGBTQ youth, and like you just shouldn't drink, and you just shouldn't smoke pot, and you definitely shouldn't use crystal meth. And like all of those are true for anybody at any right, for young people, especially with our like brain development. But I think that those conversations then really, for me, when I did eventually drink and then everything didn't like fall apart like I had been told it would, then I was like, oh, well, then I can do this other substance. And once I did that substance and like, I didn't immediately feel like I was hooked or didn't immediately have like cravings for crystal meth. I just thought everything else was a lie. And when like everything around me and how people talked about me and my identity was obviously a lie, I had a lot of like, what else did you lie to me about?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that. Absolutely. So, and I love that idea of like talking to kids about harm reduction, because that was not how it was when I was in, and like I said, DARE, and I don't even remember, it was like, just don't do drugs. I think I failed the DARE paper that I had to write. It just like, I didn't do so hot with it, but yeah, teaching kids about harm reduction, right? It's safe ways to do things or to use, or like whatever it is, right? Or warning signs when like maybe your use is turning into something that maybe you need to check in with somebody about, right? I love that so much. Hope, did you want to add anything, or I thought I saw your hand go?
Oh, I was just like nodding a lot because I was agreeing with both of you and what you were saying. Yeah, just talking more and knowing more. Like I didn't know what any drugs were. I barely knew different types of alcohol until I got to college. And I didn't even know about like my family's history with it until like I got sober, and all of that stuff is like things to talk. I feel like that I would love for someone had talked to me like when I was a small child. Well, maybe not like a toddler, but you know what I'm saying. Just like growing up and understanding like not to just not do it, but like what are the dangers as our brains are developing, and here are some signs, and here like I honestly I don't think I even knew what weed was until I got to college. I just knew it smelled like a skunk and that was it. And that's not even really true anymore. So
Hope, you said something that like I actually thought was really interesting. You said, not talking to somebody when they're really young, or maybe not talking to somebody when they're really young about alcohol. And I remember when I was maybe a preteen, like I was, I don't even know how old I was, but I don't think I'd started, I had not started high school yet. And I remember talking to one of my friends down the street, and he had specifically said, he's like, oh yeah, I tried my dad's beer once. It was gross, but I'll drink it when I'm older because that's what you do. I was like, oh, and that was like my first like, oh, you just get older, and Americans, the way that I understood it was Americans drink. But in like houses where, or maybe in families where drinking was, prohibited, and cultures where drinking is prohibited, though we know it still occurs. Like I know a bunch of my uncles drank alcohol, they just hid it from everybody, even though like the adults knew, the kids may not have known, though we always found out. And it would happen at parties and at different places. So we would stumble on this stuff at a really young age. I think the first time I accidentally drank beer, I was 9 maybe, and it was in a Pepsi can. So there are instances where I think we might need to have conversations depending on like the cultures, that spaces that young people might be in, around just substances in general, and what, prohibition might look like in that space. Obviously not like prohibition, but like what it looks like in a home or a culture or a family where it is something that's prohibited, but then it's happening in private.
Absolutely. Yeah, big time. I think like for me too, in terms of what I might have needed when I was younger, everything that we're talking about for sure. And I can't, like, the common theme that I keep hearing is like conversations, like have the conversations. And I feel like as a kid, that's what I needed, not just around like drugs and alcohol, but around queerness, right? Like I have two little nibblings. We use nibbling instead of niece, and they are amazing. And one of them, she uses she, they pronouns. We just went to our first Pride together. We went to Phoenixville Pride. And it was like a magical experience, right? But they're 11 and they are exposed to like all kinds of queerness, and they have all these books. And like she saw one of her famous TikTokers that they're like obsessed with. I don't know, they're all into TikTok right now. But to see that light, right? To see that light and to be able to have these conversations, and they get to witness like my wife and I and our queer love, you know, and like media, I mean, just everything, and super affirmative and supportive in school. And I don't know, to watch that has been incredible. And it, for me, you know, not to make it about me, but I will, but I like to kind of, I feel like little me is kind of healing in this process of spending time with my little nibbling, and getting to kind of be the kind of adult that I needed when I was their age. And we have the conversations. We talk about all kinds of stuff, you know. I consistently, like when they first came out, I consistently was like, I love you, you're amazing, I believe you know, because I think like that's the big word too, is like believe your kids. Believe them when they tell you these things, you know, because it's real. And so it's just like, that's what I needed. I needed to be believed. I needed to have the conversations. I needed to know what was out there. I needed good representation in media and exposure to media. That's what I needed. And so that's what I'm like hustling to try and do for younger generations now. So yeah, that's what I want to say about that. Anybody want to add anything on that? Hope. Where you going?
Yeah, I hit the wrong button. I really like nibblings.
Yeah.
Because my sister has kids, and I'm like, I might start using that now.
Yeah. Isn't it cute?
Mhm.
Yeah, I had heard that word and then introduced it to them, and they were like, yes, I'm a nibbling. I'm not a niece, I'm not a nephew, I'm a nibbling. And I was like, yeah, you are. And so that's what we do now. Yeah, cool. So next question, I don't know if I sent this one to you guys, but what do you think is different for queer youth today compared to our adolescence?
TikTok.
Yep.
I say this joke a lot, but social media has been, you know, a wonderful, amazing tool for especially trans youth. It's provided a lot of safety. It's provided a lot of resources. It's provided a lot of affirmation. It's also a terrible, terrible place. The internet is dark and scary. But I always talk about, you know, I can tell you what I needed when I was 16 years old, 15 years old, 12 years old. But unless you're asking a 12-year-old today what it is that they need, you're never really going to know, because I mean, Friendster didn't even exist when I was in high school. So like, it's been some time. And I can't imagine what it would be like being like outed in school right now, as like a queer young person that's really trying to like protect themselves from maybe getting outed to family or something like that. There's a lot of really amazing things that can come from it, but I can also imagine just like how stressful being in the closet could be right now, and what that relationship with the closet and fear can trigger, for lack of a better word, in terms of like relationship with substance use.
Yeah, major. Hope.
Um, Very great points. And Katie, you were also kind of getting on some stuff too about that of, I mean, the fact that we're even able to talk right now like this, and we have these groups and we can currently be out and express our identities is a big part of it. I mean, social media, 100%, that is like so much of it, but just also that, we're able to like we're starting to see ourselves reflected in like current things. I love watching TV, like TV series, and I absolutely love when I see a trans character being played by a trans person because that was not a thing growing up. And it's just like that is what we're like younger generations are getting like being able to see and like seeing healthy like relationships within the queer community, not the like stereotypical thing. Like I like mentioned the L word, like not those weren't great representations of the queer community, but there are now like good representations that are mainstream and it's really great. And but there is the other side of that too of like the scariness of social media being used as a tool that is like that can out someone as well.
Massively, yeah. And like I'm really into TV too. What I love about several TV shows is like, yes, trans characters being played by trans people, but also the storyline isn't wrapped up in their identity or somebody's sexuality. It's just a part of them, it's not like all focused on somebody's gender or sexuality. And I love that too, because I'm like, okay, I don't need another, like just have them normalize this, right? Normalize this. So I love that you said that. Yeah. And I'm with all of you. Social media, I mean, like just for reference, my assumption age wise, I don't know everybody's age, but like I grew up with like AOL dial-up internet. Yes, maybe. So kind of Hope says kind of. Okay, so that's the kind of internet, which I didn't understand how to operate it beyond instant messenger. I don't even know if Google was a thing then. Maybe it was Ask Jeeves. I don't know. But I didn't have a whole lot of ways to connect with others other than AIM. And you're right, there's dangers in TikTok, right? But there's also like so much healing going on with it, and all kinds of social media and internet. But it is interesting to see like how media has changed, how the world has okay, I won't go with the world, how some media has changed, how some things have changed for the better. And then at the other side, it's like just as fast as we're getting some celebration, not acceptance, celebration, we're getting squashed down right now, and it's been like holding both of those at the same time, at least for me and other queer people I know experience has been like really tough. And even like my little nibbling, she knows what's going on, right? With laws around trans kids, so it's been like a tough thing to try and navigate internally. I know for myself, and I'm getting some head nods. Does anybody want to add anything about that? No. Totally okay.
Kind of somewhat related, but maybe just to be trying to be hopeful, since that is my name. Just that what I think about a lot with what's going on and how scary it can be is the fact that we know that there's so many like us out there now, where before it wasn't like that. When like, when you're older than Google, because I am still older than Google, you didn't know how many like queers there were. You could maybe guess and whatever, but they were there. They're always there. But like now we know, like we have giant prides in all the major cities and even these tiny little cities. So like we know that there's like a bunch of people that this is like that are just going to come together and like try to take care of the youth, because like that's the important thing. Because we always want a better thing for the next generation.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you said that. I needed to hear that. But yeah, there's so many of us for sure. And that kind of rolls into my next question of what does pride mean to you?
season or in general?
In general, whatever you want. And if you want me to go first, I can totally go first too. Because for me, Pride is just like unapologetically, authentically, sometimes or most of the time, super in your face being me. Right? That's what it is. It's being me. And yes, rainbows are everywhere right now. They are slapped on everything. It takes away some of that sparkle and magic from everything. And at the same time, like, again, walking into Target with my nibbling and seeing them pick out, you know, pansexual flag t-shirts and stuff like that. Again, when I was 11, no, that was not happening walking into Target. So I have some gratitude that there are rainbows everywhere right now. But at the same time, I'm like, all right, give it back to us here. But bottom line, Pride just means being me. And that's how I define it. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to like kind of think about it, just being you and also feeling accepted and knowing that when you walk into like a Pride event or you see a rainbow thing, which by the way, we do have greeting cards now, which I think is like wild. I found that out at Pride Target this year. We have actual greeting cards. But knowing that when you're walking into a crowd of like Pride, that you don't have to do all these disclaimers about who you are. Like there are people among you that you don't have to like, they're not going to like see you for a certain way or anything. Like you have a bond, and it's a very strong bond, and it's like an unspoken bond of like, this is my people.
Yeah, I mean, Pride is really about community for me, but I think when I think about what community I found in spaces, is really about protest and fighting back and engaging. You know, in Illinois, it's our primary today. So, you know, lots of folks are like voting, and I did early voting, but for me, it's still about engaging in civil discourse and civil disobedience. And Pride for me has always been about fighting back with everything with Roe and with everything around criminalization of, you know, we've had some really amazing rollbacks of like antiquated, terrible laws around substance use and HIV criminalization and LGBTQ criminalization in Illinois. And I would say, you know, a lot of that is because of folks like, you know, everybody who's on this call getting engaged and marching and sending angry letters and tweets and all that stuff. And that to me will always be what Pride is.
Love it. Yes.
Pride is
yes.
riot.
Yeah, Pride is a riot. That's right. It's true. I love it. I love it so much. Just being mindful of time. Anybody else have any kind of last thoughts on queer recovery, growing up queer, your experience? Any last thing that y'all want to share?
If you can't find a queer sober space, I promise they exist. I didn't know they existed until I moved to Philadelphia. And I was very alone for a few years in my sobriety because of it. But when I found it, it was great.
Amazing.
I would just say for anybody who's navigating substance use and what that might look like for them, there's no one right way to figure out what is working for you and one right way to figure out how to take the next step toward what you think is healthier for you. And so, you know, if you might have to write your own pages in your book, I think you'll write a great story. So we'll be here to help read it with you.
Amazing. Yeah, and I just want to add, thank you everyone who logged on tonight to spend an hour with us here. Whether you're queer yourself, in recovery yourself, or you have kiddos, or other queer family members, the fact that you're here and showing up is like practicing allyship. To hear us chat about some really cool stuff for the last hour. So again, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank these wonderful panelists, for being here. And I think that that's it. One last thing before y'all go, I'm going to put the link for the survey in the chat right now. So if you could click on this link that I'm putting in here and fill that out, that would be wonderful. Yeah, I think it's just a Google form. Just click on it, fill it out for all the participants and attendees. And I think that we're good. So thanks everybody so much. Bye y'all.